told you that the most important geopolitical meeting of the 21st century just happened, and the mainstream media completely missed the point. Donald Trump just landed in Beijing. The official story? Trade talks, tariff negotiations, diplomatic formalities, but there's something far bigger happening beneath the surface. Something that involves Iran, Venezuela, the City of London, trillions of dollars in gold reserves, and a coordinated move between Washington and Beijing that could permanently end the era of globalist financial control. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, the world is going to look very, very different to you. Every major news outlet is framing Trump's China visit as a tension-filled diplomatic encounter between two rival superpowers. And yes, there are real trade disputes on the table, but that framing misses something fundamental. Here's what nobody is talking about: the dog that didn't bark. When Trump moved aggressively in Venezuela, seizing effective control of the country's oil infrastructure, bringing Maduro's regime under American jurisdiction, what did China do? Nothing. When American and allied forces escalated operations around the Strait of Hormuz, effectively blockading Iranian oil exports, what did China do? Again, nothing. For a nation that imports approximately 80% of its oil through the Persian Gulf, that is extraordinary silence. China has enormous leverage here. It could have flooded the diplomatic zone with protests, dispatched naval assets to the region, or coordinated with Russia for a counter-response. Instead, Beijing stayed on the sidelines with an almost suspicious calm. That calm is not weakness. That calm is coordination. To understand Beijing, you first have to understand Caracas. Venezuela was not just a foreign policy move. It was a precision strike on the financial infrastructure of the globalist network. Think about what Venezuela represented. Under Maduro, the country was a hub for illicit oil sales. Oil sold at massive discounts to sanctioned buyers, generating cash flows that bypassed the international banking system. That cash funded drug cartels. And those drug cartels, as investigators have been documenting for years, have deeply interconnected relationships with financial institutions centered in London. The moment Trump effectively neutralized Maduro's regime and brought Venezuelan oil under American sphere of influence, he didn't just win a geopolitical chess piece. He cut off a major funding artery. And then there's the intelligence dimension. Documents and data recovered from Venezuela reportedly contain detailed evidence about election infrastructure, specifically the software systems used to manipulate vote counts. This isn't just geopolitics. This is political dynamite for domestic audiences in the US, the UK, and across Europe. If election fraud methodologies were being shared as best practices between allied governments, and there is growing evidence suggesting exactly that, then what was recovered in Venezuela has implications that extend far beyond Latin America. Now let's talk about Iran, because this is where the pattern becomes undeniable. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, has long served as the enforcement arm of a shadow financial network. It funds Hezbollah in Lebanon. It bankrolled the Houthis in Yemen. It supplied Hamas in Gaza. And the money flowing through these proxy organizations traces back through a labyrinthine series of transactions to financial institutions with deep roots in the City of London. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented. The U.S. Treasury's own sanctions designations have mapped portions of this network publicly. When American-led operations effectively tightened the noose around IRGC funding, something remarkable happened. Lloyd's of London, the 337-year-old insurance marketplace that has underwritten maritime risk through wars, pandemics, and every conceivable global crisis, announced it was withdrawing insurance coverage for shipping in the Gulf. Let me say that again. Lloyd's of London, which has insured ships through World War I, World War II, the Cold War, the Gulf War, withdrew coverage for the first time in 337 years. That is not a business decision. That is a political signal, and it tells you exactly whose interests Lloyd's has historically served. Then came the access denials. NATO allies informed the United States that American forces could not use certain bases to conduct operations. Diego Garcia, Glasgow, facilities that were paid for in blood and treasure across generations of military cooperation. Unless those actors were genuinely desperate, unless they were trying trying to protect something vital, they would never have shown their hand so clearly. The camouflage fell away. And what it revealed was not an alliance. It was a protection racket. Most people don't understand what the City of London actually is. It is not London, the city. It's a 1 square mile financial jurisdiction within London, sometimes called the Square Mile, that operates under its own laws, its own police force, its own governance structures, largely separate from the British government. The Bank of England, the major clearing banks, the commodity trading floors, the insurance markets led by Lloyd's. For centuries, this tiny patch of ground has been the nerve center of global finance. And for those same centuries, whoever controls the City of London has, in various forms, influenced the outcome of wars, because war is extraordinarily profitable when you're on both sides of it. You fund the weapons, you insure the ships, you broker the settlements, you charge interest on the reconstruction loans. What Trump and potentially what Xi appear to be doing is systematically dismantling the mechanisms that allow this kind of multi-sided war profiteering to continue. Venezuela was one leg, Iran was a second leg. The BRICS initiative, which Trump explicitly targeted with sanctions threats early in his presidency, was a third leg. Each move, standing alone, looks like a regional foreign policy decision. Together, they look like a coordinated campaign. Here's where it gets genuinely brilliant and genuinely dangerous. Modern financial markets run on algorithms. High-frequency trading systems built by the world's largest private equity and hedge fund operations make decisions in microseconds based on pattern recognition and news sentiment analysis. These algorithmic traders have a simple rule for Middle East news. If tension escalates, go long on oil. If peace signals emerge, go short. And Trump appears to have figured out how to exploit this deliberately. Watch the pattern. When the situation around the Strait of Hormuz looks like it's escalating, when tankers are being threatened, when military postures harden, oil prices start to spike. The algorithms kick in. Billions of dollars flow into long oil positions, primarily managed by the largest financial institutions in London and New York. Then Trump tweets or posts to Truth Social, something like, "We're making great progress with Iran. I think we'll have a deal very soon." These are smart people. The algorithms reverse. Oil positions unwind. The long traders lose billions. Then the signal flips again. A harsh warning about Iran's nuclear program. A threat to permanently lock down the straits. Oil spikes. Then peace signals again. This is not random. This is deliberate volatility engineering. And the primary victims are the algorithmic trading operations of the large global financial institutions. The very institutions with the deepest ties to the City of London network. Scott Bessent at the Treasury has simultaneously been dismantling the banking infrastructure that enabled the IRGC's financial flows, shutting down no fewer than 7 institutions identified as laundering money for drug cartels and terrorist proxies. Every road led back to London, every single time. So what is actually on the table when Trump and Xi sit down without electronics in the room? Let me give you my assessment. And I want to be clear that this is informed analysis, not confirmed intelligence. First, energy security. China needs oil. Approximately 80% of its supply transits the Persian Gulf. With American operations effectively controlling access through the Strait of Hormuz, Beijing needs guarantees. The deal on the table likely involves Chinese-flagged vessels receiving priority access, which, interestingly, is exactly what appears to have happened during the recent operational period, with reports that Chinese vessels were moving when others couldn't. In exchange for that access, Xi provides assurances, no safe harbor for the existing Iranian regime, no interference with American operations, and a commitment to participate in whatever post-sanctions Iranian economic framework emerges. China gets discounted oil from a new Iran without the sanction risk. America gets China's cooperation without a military confrontation. Second, gold and monetary policy. Both the United States and China have been accumulating gold at unprecedented rates. Both have been doing so with minimal public disclosure. When 2 major powers simultaneously exit the paper currency markets at this scale, it is not coincidence. It signals that both governments are preparing for a fundamental restructuring of the global monetary system. What does that mean practically? It means the current dollar-dominated reserve currency system, which has undergirded American financial hegemony and City of London influence since Bretton Woods, may be heading for a controlled transition rather than a chaotic collapse. The question is whether Trump and Xi are coordinating that transition together. Third, spheres of influence and the sovereigntist framework. The American national security strategy has explicitly acknowledged spheres of influence for the first time in decades: Russia's sphere, China's sphere, an emerging arc of sovereign identity across the global south. That is an extraordinary diplomatic signal. It essentially says, we're not going to fight every proxy war on every continent anymore. We're going to recognize that major powers have regional authority, and we're going to negotiate from that reality rather than fighting it. If Trump and Xi are reaching an understanding on these three fronts, energy, monetary transition, and spheres of influence, then what we are witnessing is not a trade negotiation. It is the drafting of a new world order. And this time, the City of London didn't write it. Here's something that most financial commentators are completely missing. Certain nations are already quietly repositioning themselves for this transition. Iraq. For decades, Iraq's currency, the dinar, has been artificially suppressed, kept at near worthless valuations by an international financial architecture that benefited from keeping Iraq resource-rich but economically dependent. But look at what's happening. Iraq is asserting greater control over its oil revenues. It is making moves toward genuine monetary sovereignty. If the old system of financial control loosens its grip, the dinar represents one of the most compelling currency revaluation stories on the planet, because Iraq's underlying resource wealth is enormous. Vietnam. This is a country with extraordinary manufacturing capacity, a young and educated workforce, and deepening integration into global supply chains that are deliberately being redirected away from China as American companies reshape their sourcing strategies. Vietnam is positioned to be one of the great economic success stories of the next 2 decades, if it can maintain its sovereignty against both Chinese pressure and globalist financial dependency. These countries are not accidents. They are examples of what happens when nations with genuine resource or manufacturing wealth are freed from the artificial constraints of a rigged international financial system. And the common thread in all of this is, what happens to the City of London when its tools of control, sanctions, insurance denial, currency manipulation, debt dependency, stop working? It becomes irrelevant. Not immediately. These institutions have accumulated power over centuries, and they will not surrender it without a fight. The desperate moves we're seeing, the European Union's legal campaigns against opposition parties in France and elsewhere, the obvious weaponization of judicial systems against anyone who challenges the established order, the coordinated pressure on platforms to censor alternative analysis, all of this is the behavior of an entity that is losing and knows it. Now, and this is where I want to be completely honest with you, the globalists are not finished. They have resources that dwarf anything we can easily comprehend. The financial networks we're discussing are not publicly listed companies with transparent balance sheets. They are multi-generational accumulations of wealth operating through foundations, private equity vehicles, sovereign wealth funds, and institutional structures that can absorb enormous losses and still function. What we're watching is not their defeat. It's the beginning of a serious challenge to their operational capacity. They still have several weapons left. The banking system. The global banking infrastructure remains heavily interlocked with City of London interests. A coordinated banking crisis, one that could be engineered through liquidity withdrawal, credit contraction, or a sovereign debt cascade, would create exactly the kind of chaos that historically allows these networks to reconsolidate power. Financial insiders have flagged autumn 2025 as a period of elevated risk. I am not predicting this. I'm flagging it as a risk scenario to monitor. Health and pandemic infrastructure. The playbook for using public health emergencies as instruments of economic and social control was tested thoroughly in 2020. The infrastructure built during that period, the international agreements, the emergency authorization frameworks, the supply chain controls, remains largely intact. Watch for signals, lawfare. We're already seeing this in Europe. The moment Marine Le Pen's national rally gained momentum in France, EU investigators announced financial irregularity probes. Romania's election results were invalidated. Hungary faces constant institutional pressure. This is the whack-a-mole strategy, and it requires enormous resources to sustain against a continent full of electorates that are fundamentally moving towards sovereignty. The key point is this: even if Trump and Xi succeed in their immediate goals, neutralizing Iranian proxy funding, restructuring Gulf energy flows, beginning a monetary transition, the networks they're challenging have survived the fall of Rome, the collapse of the British Empire, and 2 world wars. They will adapt, they will retrench, they will wait. The best outcome of what we're witnessing is not permanent victory. It's a generational breathing space, perhaps 2 or 3 decades during which free peoples can rebuild the civic, economic, and institutional structures that resist this kind of capture. That's worth fighting for. It's worth understanding, and it's worth sharing. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The Trump-Xi-Beijing summit is not a trade meeting. It is potentially one of the most consequential geopolitical events of our lifetime. A moment where 2 of the world's most powerful leaders may be quietly agreeing to reshape the foundations of the international order. Whether they succeed depends on factors none of us can fully predict. The globalist networks are powerful, adaptive, and patient. But for the first time in decades, they are being challenged simultaneously on multiple fronts: financial, military, diplomatic, and informational. Watch the gold flows. Watch the oil markets. Watch which currencies strengthen and which institutions start to crack. Watch which politicians face sudden legal challenges the moment they gain genuine popular support. The map is in the data, and now you know how to read it. If this video gave you value, please share it. Not because I'm asking for clicks, but because this analysis is being actively suppressed on mainstream platforms. Your share is how it reaches someone who needs to see it. Subscribe for more breakdowns. Drop your questions and pushback in the comments. I read every one. And until next time, stay sovereign, stay skeptical, and keep asking the questions nobody else is asking.